So I titled this Top 10 Safe, Effective, and Easy to Grow Herbs, Taking Control of Our Health Through Plant Wisdom and Knowledge, and I really believe that statement. I have taken control of my health and my family's health over the past several years because of the knowledge that I have acquired, and I hope to share some of that with you. I grew up gardening as a young child with my dad, and I've loved it ever since. As a teenager, I was always interested in herbs, and the very first herb I ever used was raspberry leaf for menstrual cramps, and I was really surprised that it had worked for me, and I wanted to know more. I had an insatiable hunger, and still do, to learn more and more about them. So, as a disclaimer, I just would like to say this presentation is not intended to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any illness. It is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult a healthcare professional before treating yourself or others with herbs. Getting a diagnosis from a doctor before treatment is always a great idea. Herbs can and do interact with pharmaceutical drugs. Okay, so let's compare allopathic or conventional medicine with herbalism. I kind of want to lay down just a little bit of a foundation here. So allopathic or conventional medicine is really good for emergency life-threatening situations. I had a son who is 13 now, but was 5 years old at the time, and he decided to climb up a big, tall lamppost about 20 feet in the air, and he fell from almost the top and broke his femur in half. And so I was grateful for, medical intervention and being able to help him heal. But it doesn't always treat the root of the problem. I know quite a few friends of mine that weren't feeling well, and they go to the doctor and they're prescribed an antidepressant, when the reality is or was that they had a low thyroid and they just weren't diagnosed well. And so they're not always good at getting to the root of the problem. Allopathic medicine can be really expensive. In the year 2016, $329 billion were spent on just prescription drugs alone. And that's an astronomical amount of money. They can be dangerous and life-threatening. We know that 1.5 to 2.7 million hospitalizations are due to prescription drug reactions. Donald Light, a professor at Rowan University School of Osteopathic Medicine in Stratford, New Jersey, wrote a paper in 2013 called Institutional Corruption of Pharmaceuticals and the Myth of Safe and Effective Drugs. He found that over 2,400 people died per week from using prescription drugs correctly. His findings did not include anyone that had died from a result of prescribing errors or overdosing or self-medication. That was, people that were taking the drugs the way they were supposed to. And so that, equaled to be about 128,000 a year. And today, that number has increased to 248,000 a year. People die every year from taking pharmaceutical drugs correctly, as prescribed. That's the fourth leading cause of death in the U.S., the third being medical error, as we know from earlier today. So medical drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, a lot of them are derived from plants. But what do they do to those plants? Well, they denaturalize them, right? They create isolated synthetic chemicals from those plants. And then they're given in higher dosages, and they can create a toxic effect, and even create addiction and habituation, really reversing the desired healing effects that we are looking for. So let's talk about herbalism. They're easy to find. Herbs are really easy to find. You can grow them, right? You can find them up in the mountains. They're very inexpensive. You can buy maybe a small plant of lemon balm or a packet of seeds, and you have medicine for headaches and for anxiety and for cold sores or shingles or chickenpox. The lemon balm kills the herpes virus on contact. So you could take that internally and use it externally. So very inexpensive, very cheap, right? They are safe and effective. The chemical substances produced by the metabolic process of plants are very similar to those made by the bodies of humans and animals. So our bodies respond to them with few unwanted side effects. And then when we're using herbs, we use the whole plant and not just an isolated chemical. The whole plant usage is really important. I don't know if you've heard of the study that they did on comfrey. This is why the FDA said don't take comfrey internally because of the pyrrolizidine alkaloids. And what they did was they took 6-week-old rats and they gave these rats 40% of their diet an extract, so a concentrated form of comfrey root. And they found that these 6-week-old baby rats developed lesions on their liver. You can't take that internally. Well, what they didn't do was they gave those rats the whole plant, and they didn't give the rats, an appropriate amount that we would take normally. We could easily drink 3 cups of comfrey tea a day and not have any problems. And so there's another chemical compound in comfrey called allantoin, and that is where you find a lot of the mucilage, and it's very soothing to the respiratory tract and the digestive system, and even the urinary tract system. So a lot of herbalists say that allantoin helps to balance any ill side effects from the pyrrolizidine alkaloids. Now, some people might have, an allergy to a certain family, a plant family, like the Asteraceae family, the daisy family, but rarely are there ever life-threatening situations where someone has had a really poor reaction to herbs. Now, there are plants that are highly poisonous. If you take one bite, they'll kill you, right? Like poison hemlock. Poison hemlock grows behind my house, along Bingham Creek, and even in the mountains. And so it's really important to know what it is you're using, what it is you're, looking for or harvesting if you're harvesting in the wild. And then if you're ever in doubt, research the herb you are interested in and be really thorough about what it is you're taking. So it's better at addressing the root of the problem. And I'll get into that in a minute. Herbalism can help simple ailments like headaches or even mastitis. I've cured myself of mastitis many times as I'm a breastfeeding mom. I've been a breastfeeding mom for a while. And it can also help with chronic illness. About 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis and adrenal fatigue. And I just wasn't getting any relief until just recently. I started, maybe in the last year, taking adaptogenic herbs like schizandra berry and eleuthero, milky oak tops, and pantothenic, I can't say the word, it's a B vitamin, pantothenic acid. And I felt amazing results with those supplements and those herbs. I don't need a nap, I don't wake up tired anymore. So I know that those herbs are helping that chronic illness. Okay. And then last, herbs must be taken early, often, and after the onset of illness or be a part of our lifestyle if we suffer from chronic issues. I know that if one has suffered for a long time, it takes about a month of healing for every year that someone has been unwell. Okay, so what do we need to look for when growing and using herbs? This is Calendula. Calendula officinalis is its Latin name. And it's also known as pot marigold. That's the common name. And if you were just to go to the nursery and just buy some marigolds, you may not be getting the right plant. So you want to look at that Latin name. That Latin name is really important. There are a lot of different species of St. John's wort. And the St. John's wort medicinal species you want to get is Hypericum perforatum. And that's the one that is the most highly medicinal. So it's really important to look at those Latin names and make sure that you're getting the correct plant. Okay, so what are the benefits of growing our own? Well, we have a better connection with nature and with the herbs that we use. We can mix those ornamental plants to create beauty and curb appeal. This is a picture of one of my front beds, and I have lots of medicine growing in this one bed. I have bee balm and echinacea and lavender and yarrow, just wonderful plants that are beautiful, right? And you can grow those. Don't be afraid to grow anything in those. This is my front yard as well. So diversify with color, variety, and herbs that contain volatile oils to attract beneficial insects. And then get to know your plants on a really familiar level. When I do herb walks, I always encourage people to, as they take a cutting of the plant, to smell the plant on both ends and to taste it if it's okay to taste, and to feel it and to look at it and to journal about it and to dry it and just to keep a live journal with those plants in the journal. And that tends to really help with that connection and understanding and knowing what the plant does. And then when you grow your own, you know where your herbs come from and how they were grown, right? You know that you weren't using any pesticides or chemicals, and you are able to harvest them at peak medicinal value. And we'll get into when it's the best time to harvest certain plants. All right, so finding success in the garden. Like I said, I grew up gardening with my dad. I have fond memories of gardening with him when we lived in Beaumont, Texas. And, we garden almost year-round down there. And he would always tell me there are 3 keys to successful gardening. The first one is soil preparation, the second one is soil preparation, and the third one is soil preparation. It's everything, right? Because we're creating an environment, we're creating a microbiome within our soil, like we want to within our own bodies. And so it's really important to keep it organic. Those chemicals, even fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers, will kill the microbes in the soil. And so if we can, at all costs, use organic fertilizers and minerals and things like that. I like to add compost every year. That helps to increase that microbial production in the soil. It acts as a weed barrier, so I like to put down about 3 to 4 inches in all of my beds everywhere. It acts as a weed barrier. It acts as a soil release fertilizer. So by the time July comes, I stop fertilizing with like fish emulsion or something organic, and that compost is broken down enough so that the microbes can take over and provide the plants with the nutrition that they need. And then it also helps to retain moisture. So in Utah here, we're in a desert. That compost is really going to help retain the moisture. Okay, so let's see. And then if you can, invest in an automatic watering system. It'll change your life. You don't have to worry about watering, and even with containers, you might have to water 2 or 3 times a day if it's really, really hot. So if you can invest in an automatic watering system, that will be good. Okay, so my top 10 safe, effective, and safe herbs, I repeated myself there. Top 10 safe, effective, and easy to grow herbs, I meant to say. It was a really difficult decision. I grow over 100 different species on my 1/4 acre lot. It's just a 1/4 acre. And I'm running out of room. I don't have much space, and I want to grow a lot more. So these are the top 10 that I chose. On my website, I have my top 40, and then I'm working on another 40 as well. So you can visit that if you're interested. So the first one is our Calendula officinalis, or pot marigold. It's an annual, and its name has the word calendar in it, calendula. And if it didn't freeze, this flower would be blooming year-round. It would bloom every month of the year. It can grow in dry areas. It's not picky at all. It's pretty drought-tolerant. But its name, officinalis, so anytime you see an herb with officinalis at the end of it in its species name, it is considered a medicinal herb. Because the monks, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they would study these plants and they would name them, and anytime they they studied a plant in their officines or their offices, they would call it officinalis at the end. So anytime you see officinalis at the end of a Latin name, it's medicinal. All right, so it's a really good antibiotic. It's antiseptic. It's anti-inflammatory. It's a good antifungal. It's really great use for thrush and for diaper rashes in a salve or a cream. I use it in my skin salve. It's a vulnerary herb, which means it's going to help accelerate healing. It helps to create rapid cell division and help that healing happen a lot faster. When it's used with cleavers, it's a really good lymphatic cleanser, so it's going to help cleanse the lymph. And if you use it with comfrey, it's really good for healing stomach ulcers. So you can use comfrey and calendula together and heal a stomach ulcer. There are no contraindications, and the flower is the medicine. Those who are pregnant, there is a little bit of a stimulus with the uterus, so be really cautious if you're using that and pregnant. So the second one is capsicum annuum or cayenne pepper. This is an annual. The fruit is the medicine, and it's really great for high and low blood pressure. It helps to make the vessels elastic. So it's good for both. It's really great for pain. It has a chemical compound in it called substance P, and it deadens the nerves. My husband cut himself once, and all I had was cayenne pepper, and so we put some cayenne pepper on his cut. It was pretty deep, and it stung for just a moment, but then that substance P kicked in, and it went numb for him. It's good for stomach ulcers, believe it or not. So it's really important to not take a capsule, but actually take the actual powder in some water and help that cayenne actually hit the stomach, so it helps to stimulate mucus production in the digestive tract. It helps to break up mucus in the respiratory system. So when Brigham Young was getting ready to come over to the Salt Lake Valley, he told all of the saints to pack cayenne pepper for the catarrh, which is another word for mucus. And it's really good for shock. Dr. Patrick Jones, my mentor, he uses cayenne pepper tincture for dogs who have been hit by a car, and they're in shock and they are ready to die. And he says he puts one squirt of that cayenne pepper in their mouth, and they're back. They're out of that shock period. That's really good for heart attack. According to Dr. Christopher, it can take a heart attack away within 60 seconds. Avoid if you have issues with the nightshade family. So the third one is Matricaria recutita or chamomilla. This is chamomile. The German chamomile is an annual. The Roman is a perennial. It looks a lot like feverfew, but it has a distinct apple-like aroma to it, and it smells really good. Where feverfew is a little bit more musty, and its leaves are a little more lace or fern-like. It's an anti-inflammatory and a nervine, so it's going to help calm the nerves and decrease inflammation. It's really good for pain anywhere in the body that's caused by inflammation. So for headaches, especially, we've used chamomile tea compresses for headaches on the spine and up the neck, and that's really helped. You can use it with catnip for colic and digestive upset, as well as stress and anxiety. And so excellent kidney restorative. It will actually help heal your kidneys. And that's the same with nettle seed. Nettle seed is also a kidney restorative. You want to avoid it if you're allergic to the daisy family, and the flower is the medicine. Our fourth one is dandelion, Taraxacum officinalis. There's our officinalis word in there. Again, it's a perennial, and the whole plant is edible. The flowers, the leaves, the root. The leaves are really high in vitamins, especially when you use it with nettles, really high in minerals. It's a really good diuretic to help flush the kidneys, really good for bladder infections, and it's really good used, the root is really good used with burdock root and milk thistle to help cleanse and restore the liver. So those people who have liver issues, that combination is really nice. The flowers are a good anodyne. I like to use the flowers with fresh arnica flowers. I'll go and harvest them in the mountains with lavender and even chamomile and make a really nice anti-inflammatory lotion with those. And the root is a good choleagog. Choleagog is another word used to help stimulate bile production in the liver. All right, so the fifth one is Sambucus species. There's a lot of different species of elder. Elder is a perennial, and it's a very strong antiviral. This is another one of those herbs that's really important for the cold or any respiratory infections as well as influenza. And the flower is a really good diaphoretic. That means it's going to help us sweat out a fever. The leaf is the strongest and should only be used by adults. And the berry is, of course, we know, immune stimulating as well as a gentle laxative. And those are used for making syrup, very safe for children. And then we want to use all the parts of the plant after they've been dried or cooked because they can be mildly toxic if they're fresh. There are no contraindications, although those with autoimmune issues should not take it for long periods of time that exceed 2 weeks. But usually if you've got just an upper respiratory infection going on or you feel like you're coming down with the flu, you usually don't need to use it any longer than that. Okay, so this is Grindelia or gumweed. It grows everywhere along dirt roadways and rocky paths. It will grow in really dry climates. This is a biennial or a short-lived perennial, and the medicine is the sticky flower, the bud, before it opens up, and you'll see that it has a really kind of, if you were to go and harvest it before the flower opens, it has a really white sticky film around the bud, and that's the medicine, and it's a really great antispasmodic, antibiotic, and expectorant, and this makes it a really good herb for asthma. It's going to help open up the airway for pneumonia because it has antibacterial properties, and even pertussis. This is really good for whooping cough as well. It's a good vulnerary herb, so it's going to help us accelerate wound healing with wounds on the skin, as well as poison ivy rashes. It's really good for poison ivy. And if you have any kidney or heart disease, you'll not want to use this one. Okay, Althea officinalis, or marshmallow. This is one of my favorite herbs. It's a perennial. And the whole plant is medicinal, the leaf, the flower, and the root. It's a very soothing, demulcent herb. Demulcents are a word for a lot of mucilage or kind of slimy substance that coats inflamed tissues. And it's really good for the digestive tract, for the respiratory tract, and even the urinary and the kidneys. It can be really soothing for those who have kidney stones. They're trying to pass the kidney stones, and really good for the skin. It's a really good replacement for the endangered slippery elm. Slippery elm is on the endangered list, and it does almost exactly the same thing, and it's so easy to grow. If you let it go to seed, you'll have marshmallow in your garden forever. And it can also be used for malnourished people to help keep them alive. You can give them kind of like a slippery elm or marshmallow roots mush to eat. It helps to enrich mother's milk, so you can use this with fennel seed. Fennel seed helps to increase milk production, but marshmallow helps to enrich milk production, so make it better, more vitamins, richer. And then it can also help stop the progression of gangrene and sepsis, along with plantain. You would take those things internally and externally. Good for wounds, and there are no contraindications. It's a very safe herb. All right, here's mullein. This is Verbascum thapsus, and all of the species of mullein are medicinal. It's a biennial, so that means in the first year it's going to develop a little rosette of leaves, and then the second year it's going to put up this flower stalk. And you want to be able to, if you want to harvest the root, then you're going to want to get the root in the fall of the first year or the spring of the second year. But the leaves can be harvested any time. They're used for respiratory problems, It's mildly sedating to the nerves, so it calms dry coughs and is a gentle expectorant. This is another really good herb for bronchitis and pertussis. It really helps to protect the cilia so that the cilia doesn't get damaged as much from all the coughing. And the flowers are really good anodyne, which means that it's good for pain. It's really good for ear infections because it has antimicrobial properties. It's used in earache oils. It's going to help with the pain, but also going to kill any bacteria in there. And I like to use it with garlic and calendula and St. John's wort. Those all have antimicrobial and pain properties. The root is wonderful. It's traditionally used for back pain and inflammation, and it also helps to strengthen the sphincters of the urinary system for bladder control. So if you have kids that kind of wet the bed and they don't have a lot of strength in their sphincters, you can try giving them mullein root. The seeds are toxic. They weren't actually native. Mullein wasn't native to the United States. It was brought in by the Europeans, and they used mullein seed to paralyze the fish. They would use it to go fishing because it's a neurotoxin, and they would throw all the mullein seeds into the river, and all the fish would come up and just kind of lay there paralyzed, and that's how they would fish. And pretty easy and simple way to fish. But that's how we came about eating mullein here in the United States. So peppermint, Mentha piperita, it's a perennial, and if you're not careful, it will take over your yard. You want to keep it in a pot. It's a great carminative herb, which means it's going to help with digestive issues like nausea and bloating. It can also be really good for headaches and fevers as a diaphoretic. I like to use it for colds and flus. I really have not been sick for years because I use the combination of elder leaf or berry, yarrow, and peppermint. Those three together, I'll make a tea, I'll drink a couple cups, and I don't have any issues. As soon as I start to feel something come on. There's no contraindications, although some people might have like heartburn or something with it. The final herb is yarrow, Achillea millefolium, and this is my absolute favorite herb. There is one contraindication to it, and it is stimulating to the uterus, so you do not want to use it during pregnancy. But it is a perennial, and the leaf and flower are mainly used as medicine. And what's interesting about yarrow is that, I don't know if you ever grow it or you ever compare it with what you grow in your own yard or a neighbor's yard compared to what you'd see up in the mountains, but in the mountains, it's much stronger. And that's because after a 3-week drought, there's a lot more concentrated medicine in yarrow. And that's why it's kind of better to get it up there if you can. It's a diaphoretic, meaning it's going to help you sweat out a fever. It's going to help increase that fever, but it's going to help it work better. So I'm sure some of you have heard of Dr. Polevsky. He talks about fevers and the importance of a fever and helping that fever to work appropriately. He tells of a story of when he was doing some residency work, I think at an ER, and he was talking to an ER doctor who was monitoring a child who had an 108-degree fever. And the child was fine. He was acting normally, wasn't lethargic. He was drinking, he was eating. And he asked this ER doctor, he said, well, are you worried about this 108-degree fever? And he said, no, not really. He's acting fine. And then I think it was just a few weeks later, he had mentioned another child who came in with a 101-degree temperature who was completely lethargic, was not responding. And he said, now those are the signs you need to look for. Is the child responding, or is he completely out of it? And that's when you want to do something with the fever. So yarrow is really great for breaking a fever, helping you sweat out a fever, helping that fever to do the job it needs to do. It's there for a reason. It contains antibiotic properties, so it's going to help fight infections. It's going to stop bleeding internally and externally. So it's really good to use with shepherd's purse for hemorrhaging. It helps to cleanse the liver of hormones, easing PMS symptoms, as well as helping to decrease really heavy menstrual flow. So it's a really great women's herb during those menstruation years. It's effective for stings and bug bites. It has antihistamine properties. So we were up hiking, and a bee had stung, a wasp had stung my son, and we found some yarrow, and I told him to make a spit poultice out of it. I said, chew it up, and then swallow your spit and put that yarrow on your bite. And he didn't swallow at all. And then 2 weeks later, he was at a friend's house, was stung again, didn't put yarrow on it, swelled up for a week. He was allergic. I had to give him Benadryl for a few days just to get that swelling to go down. And so that's how powerful yarrow is. So if you have yarrow, or if you don't grow yarrow, you should grow it. It's not used during pregnancy. We mentioned that. So according to Darcy Williamson, she's an herbalist up in Idaho, she says that a triple tincture of yarrow can stop anaphylactic shock. I have not had the opportunity to try that, but that might be good to know. So when do we harvest herbs? When is the best time to harvest them? Well, we want to think about where the energy of the plant is, right? In the fall or in the spring, the energy of the plant is in the roots. In the leaves, it's right as the leaves are coming on before it blooms. For the flowers, it's just as they are opening. And for the seeds, it's when they're fully ripe on the plant. So this year I made a whole plant echinacea tincture where I took the leaves as the leaves came on, and it's always best to tincture echinacea fresh. It's stronger that way. And then as the flowers came on, I took the flowers and I tinctured those. And then just, this fall, I dug up some of those plants that I have. Echinacea purpura likes to reseed itself like a weed in my yard, so I have plenty of them. And you want to use plants that are like 2 to 3 years old because they have enough roots to use something with. And after that time, they can start to get a little bit woody. So you want a 2 to 3 year old plant. You'll dig that up, chop up the roots, grab the seeds as they're fully ripened on the plant. I like to blend those up as well in the blender, just because that hard covering around the seed and the alcohol isn't going to penetrate that. So I like to blend things up so there's more surface area to draw the medicine into that alcohol. And then use your senses. Decide when they're ready. Do they smell good? Do they look healthy? Do they look happy? That's when you want to harvest. Okay, how do we preserve our plants? We want to dry them in a dark, cool place out of direct sunlight. The sunlight's going to draw out those phytochemicals and it's going to deprive our plants of those compounds that we're looking for. You can dry them in baskets. This is a basket that I use to dry my herbs in. Shelves, countertops, hanging bundles. If the bundle isn't packed too tightly, we don't want to grow any mold or anything like that. Brown paper bags work really well, and a dehydrator works well as well if you stay below 110 degrees. Again, that heat can help break down those constituents that we want to keep. So how do we begin? Well, I always like to tell people, start with one plant. Any plant that you want to learn about. Start with that. Learn everything you possibly can about that plant, and then go on. And while you're doing that, make sure that you're doing the following. In Ayurvedic medicine, the Ayurvedic doctors, if they prescribe a stronger medicinal herb before doing the simple everyday things, they can get their license taken away from them. So we want to make sure that we're getting adequate sleep. We're eating healthy foods, including fermented foods. We're feeding that microbiome. We're eating a lot of fiber to help feed the microbiome. We're cutting out processed foods and sugar. We're exercising. We're moving, staying hydrated. We're getting that sunshine. That's the best form of vitamin D we can get. Lots of magnesium. And we're staying positive, right? Finding joy and gratitude in our life. That's really important. So choosing the right remedy is important for success. When practicing herbalism, we need to first ask, why is something wrong? Not necessarily what is wrong. So, for example, I have a friend who has eczema and acne, and I could make her a salve, right? I could make her like a skin healing salve, and that might help a little bit, but I need to find out what's going on in her life. Maybe she's really stressed out or she's just not eating well. And so I would give her liver-supporting herbs that are going to cleanse her liver, because when the liver's too bogged down, it's going to send all that stuff out to the skin to detox through the glands. And so we want to ask ourselves, why is something wrong, right? What can we do to decrease stress in our lives? Can we eat better? And maybe they need adrenal supportive herbs as well, like I talked about earlier, for stress. So I kind of mentioned this about cayenne pepper. When we use cayenne pepper for stomach ulcers, we want to take the actual powder and some water so that the cayenne pepper actually hits our stomach instead of the pill digesting in the small intestine. But if you're using cayenne for high and low blood pressure, then take a capsule. That's okay. Licorice root is really great for sore throats, but if we take a capsule and we don't drink it in a tea form, then we're not going to effectively hit the throat where we need it. And then same with yarrow. We want to drink a hot yarrow tea to induce sweating to break a fever. And then the powdered herb is best to stop bleeding. So think about how you want to apply those herbs, how you want to use them, and go from there. My website is organicemily.com. I do teach hands-on classes, and we do nature walks and visits. All right. Well, thank you very much.